Welcome to A Better HR Business, the podcast that looks at how HR consultants and HR tech firms grow their businesses and how they help their employers to get the best out of their people. Remember, for show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Okay, let's get started.
Hello, thanks for joining me again. Great to have you along, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation with Caroline Dowling. Caroline is a fascinating person with an amazing career and an amazing business, and she has joined me from what is now very much sunny Dublin. So Caroline, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Ben. Lovely to be here with you.
So Caroline is an executive coach. So she runs an executive coaching and change leadership facilitation business, which has always been a passion of mine in the HR world. And she helps senior leaders to lead change, navigate the tough work of human relationships, and build a compass towards their North Star, whatever that may be for them. And we're going to dive into that. But I love this business, and I love the fact that this is what you're building your business around, because we hear of so many change management scenarios, mergers and acquisitions, all kinds of things, new technology implemented. Time after time, you see two companies, A and B, and the one that spends more time on those human relationships, the leadership, the change facilitation process, they're the ones that work. And then the other ones tend to be the case studies written up on Harvard Business Review and things like that. Is that a fair call?
Totally a fair call. Forgetting about the people is such a mistake. It just won't work, because you can't drive change if you don't shift behaviors. And to shift behaviors, you have to understand who are the people that need to change their behaviors. So if you underinvest in that side and only purely focus on the technical side of the change, you're just missing the key piece, in my opinion.
Do you want to give us a bit of an overview of you and your career, and then we can dive into your business, Zeal Compass?
I spent over 20 years in the tech industry. I think accidentally sort of ended up in the tech industry. I'm not technical by background. My background was in sort of business and sociology. And I think that's where the kind of desire to work with people and support people originally started, and went on to study law after that, thinking I would become a solicitor, and then figured out, no, thanks, it's not for me. But from there, I started working in tech. I joined Google in Ireland on the first day of business back in 2003. It was very much a startup. I had no idea sort of the rocket ship that I was strapping myself onto, but it really opened my eyes as to what it's like to drive change in an organization. So tech companies, by their very nature, are disruptors. They're constantly looking to change the world in some way or another. And so when you are in that environment, you are always driving change, always looking for the next opportunity to do something differently, to optimize something, to bring something new to the world. And I feel like being there for over 20 years, I became quite normalized to that. Like, it became something that we didn't even really think too much about. We just did it. We had it in our DNA. However, doesn't mean that it always went well. We obviously learned a lot along the way, lots of failures and experiments and experiences that we needed to react to. But it just made me really curious about the concept of change, both from the sort of systemic or the organizational perspective, and also from the personal perspective. And so I went back to business school here, Michael Smurfit's business school, to study organizational change and transformation, put a bit of theory to the work experience. About 10 years ago in Google, I began coaching. So as a leader, we had an opportunity to give back our time to coach others. That was probably the piece of my job that I enjoyed the most, I would say. It was just interesting to meet people from all different backgrounds of the business, to understand what they were experiencing, hoping for, striving for, challenged by, and to support them in some way with that. That got me interested in the coaching world. And when I went and studied and certified to be a coach in the US, in Santa Barbara, it just showed me what the power of coaching can really do. And so I went down that path and said, this is kind of what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so I left Google about 1.5 years ago, set up my business about 4 years ago to experiment on the side.
In Google, when you started doing this coaching process, I guess it was to the side of your main job. Was it structured, informal, formal? Please take on 2 mentees and coach them up. How did it work?
So my sort of day job, if you will, was I was leading teams across various different functions throughout the year. So my background became more operations leadership, so running business teams. And as a result of that, you had this opportunity to give back, like I was saying. And so Google, actually being Google, created an internal platform, right? So almost like an open source platform, a marketplace. You as a leader could position yourself in the areas of experience that you had, and then employees from around the world could come and then find you as a coach and then work with you, either short-term kind of one-to-one, like individual type deep sessions, or maybe a longer sort of 3 to 6 month engagement. You would kind of work it out together. It was a wonderful experience to be able to give your time to that, but also to help people outside of your core, I guess, area, and see what people were navigating all across the business. It kept you, I think, as a leader, or me as a leader, kind of in tune with what was happening across the business, but also hopefully added some value to those coachees as well in terms of how they were getting their support as they navigated their careers.
Nice. And it's connected to your business, Seal Compass, and the services you provide and offer. But in Google, did you discover, as you were doing more of this coaching and you realized, oh, I quite like this, were there certain types of situations, people, or some other differentiator that you enjoyed working on more?
It's a really good question, because I think I started as a career coach. Although I was within the same company for a long time, I had pivoted my career many times.
Yeah.
I had shifted from advertising operations and client support to finance operations and fraud and risk, and then back to a startup in the Alphabet family and running field operations, and then across to the people operations world. So a lot of people were coming to me at the beginning to think about how they might pivot their careers. It was a fast growing company where there was so much opportunity to move. I had also geographically moved. I was living in San Francisco for 8 years. And so sometimes you'd have people thinking about geolocation transfers and things like that as well. So it started with career coaching, and that was interesting. But actually, what I've always been interested in, certainly over the last 15 plus years, has been leadership development. I've had such great support throughout my career to grow as a leader that I felt like I was getting to a point in my career where I wanted to give something back. So I was sort of interested in the theory. I had built my own sort of practice in the real world around leading teams, and then wanted to go forth and start helping other leaders become the best leaders they could possibly be.
Nice.
And so I started to move it and transition it into leadership levels. And so that just opened up sort of a new level of clients that would come to me in the company. And then I positioned my core work around that as well, and I balanced that out. So I started moving more towards work in the company that was around leadership development. I ran a sales leadership program for our EMEA president, who really wanted to shift certain behaviors in that organization at the VP director level. The work was to build a coaching culture with them, but also to help coach them through this transition that they were navigating. And then I was a people partner for a while, supporting a VP in her sales organization. So coaching her and her director team as well. So started to see this bridge towards leadership coaching, executive coaching, both in my core job and in the kind of side coaching I was doing. So then when I was thinking about building my own business, it was like, okay, well, what do I see these leaders navigating? And this is where the compass idea came. And it was about, well, a lot of folks would have at the senior level, maybe more mid-career. So they might be thinking about their own purpose, getting meaning back into their work. So that's where the zeal piece comes from. But also they may be navigating significant change or transition, not only in their life, but also in the context of the work that they're driving, particularly in the tech sector. So this sort of zeal compass idea came to me about supporting these leaders as they navigate their own leadership transitions and whatever it may be that they're leading their organizations through.
I like that combination, the compass, the direction finding, plus the zeal, the energy and the drive. And as a third benefit, if you've ever started a business, anyone listening to this, it's ridiculously hard to find a name and a website on the internet these days because every name is taken. So zeal and compass combined probably works quite well. I like that. Tell us about the transition, leaving a big company, the energy, salaries, the benefits, the free lunches and all that stuff. It's a big step. What was going through your mind to do that? Did you think you're crazy? Did you think, no, I need to do this? Talk us through the thinking behind it.
I would describe it as like a 7 or 8 year journey. I think the first step was noticing like my own patterns, noticing that I was pivoting away from the business leadership roles and pivoting more towards people centered work. So I think there was a lot of self reflection at the beginning and understanding of my own interests and desires of where I wanted to spend my time in my career. And then when I went to the Hudson Institute of Coaching in Santa Barbara and I sat initially in their coaching program and I saw what their master coaches were able to do with their coachees,
Oh,
I
really?
still remember this feeling of that's the thing I want to do. And I'd never really had that in my career before. I'd always followed opportunities. So there was these sort of initial kind of pivot points in my own understanding of where I wanted to spend my time in the next stage of my career. And that then set me on the path to go and start studying more around coaching, to study more around change and transformation, and then to start experimenting. I think experiments, whether it's in the marketing of your business or shifting your own sort of career identity, are a core part of how I coach individuals because maybe it comes from the tech background, but I think that's the only way that you can really start to get the data to understand where it is you might need to go next. And so some of the experiments were pivoting my roles, as I said earlier. Some of them were study experiments. Some of them were starting to position myself in a different way when I spoke to people or when I networked. So I ran this kind of 7 year set of experiences, I would say, and experiments to see, was this really something that I could do, that I was competent in, that I was confident and capable and had credibility in, before I started to really think seriously about making the formal financial leap. And as it turned out, then by just making those natural pivots or those experimental pivots, I ended up having an amazing few more years in the company on the people side of the house. So I
Nice.
transitioned from the business side to the people side and had a wonderful few years of experience. But it eventually just came to the point where I felt like I had done all I could do there. I remember talking to my VP at the time and saying, like, I've swum around in this fishbowl for a long time and I've been in many different locations and many different roles. And I feel like I need to leave to go and add the value that I want to add elsewhere. And setting up my own business gave me the opportunity to work with leaders from all different types of companies and backgrounds. And it was just a lot more liberating, I think, and less restricted in some way. And so it kind of opened my eyes to a broader set of leadership experiences and challenges, and also then the opportunity to add value to that. So it certainly required a lot of introspection, certainly required retraining, definitely required experimentation, and then this yearning or this itch that wouldn't go away that I really needed to go on a new path,
Yeah.
follow it. And I've just never been someone who had a destination in mind, but I really enjoy the journey. I really
Yeah.
enjoy learning things along the way.
That's a good way to be. Can I just ask about the mechanics of it? What did you do? Just hand in your notice? I think you mentioned you started your business 4 years before you left. Is that right?
Yeah, so that was sort of one of the experiments, right? Was, let me put my money where my mouth is a little bit, right? Let me just test this and see, like, is this work that I actually want to do? I was fortunate that in Google they have an outside work policy that if you, assuming you weren't, working with any sort of direct competitors, but like you could go and coach people outside of Google. That was one of these sort of approved outside work categories.
Oh, right.
Like, so, okay, well, how about I just try it for a bit? And I do work with the Hudson Institute of Coaching. They asked me to come and do some work facilitating coaching programs for them. That was a wonderful way to experiment. And then I was able to just take on my own individual clients. So I think if you have the interest and the passion about something, you're willing to give the time to it. I didn't have a huge amount of spare time, but I had some. And so I was willing to study, or I was willing to do this outside work and use that time to follow this path of curiosity and interest and see where it led me. So I was able to set up my business in that way, but it was very, very minor because the balance of time was just limited. So then I interned back to the core work. I was then making the sort of the pivot, and mechanically or tactically, what I was doing was talking to people internally and saying, this is the type of work that I'm interested in. Where can I do that in this company? And so I was speaking with maybe other leaders who I knew, some people who I didn't know. Thankfully, the culture there was quite supportive of you being able to reach out to people and who are maybe doing that work. And I could reach out to them, and I was getting clearer on my own narrative. So I was able to then share that with them and say, hey, is this work that I could do in your organization or another organization? And so I started to find and see roles that were somewhat aligned. They sadly don't have an internal executive coaching team, but they had coaching adjacent type work or leadership development type work. So then it became like sort of a job application interview process, all the usual mechanics there, and just going through and taking on these new roles. And I would say I took 3 roles during that kind of 7-year time frame where I was shifting my career into a new direction. One of them was like a geo transfer. So I moved back to Ireland for that role. One of them was a 6-month assignment. So I just moved for that 6 months. And then one of them was back to a global role, leading a global organization. So they each had their own considerations and benefits and challenges that I had to make a decision point at each time as to whether it was something I wanted to take the risk on or invest in. And along that way, then I just continued the conversations with my leadership of, this is what I want to do with my career. Can you help me? Is there opportunity? And eventually then the conversation became, this next thing I want to do is outside Google. How can I transition well? And so my managers at the time, thankfully, were very supportive and open. So we had a good relationship to have that conversation. And they just said, well, can you stay until a certain time, help us with a particular piece of work or transition, and then help the team kind of, as a leader, you kind of have to make sure you leave your team well. And so we worked out a plan for my transition then over the course of months, and then we're able to execute that. So I'm fortunate that I can say it was planned, it was communicated, it was supported, and I feel like it was a nice way to kind of round out such a career.
When you started the business itself, internal coaching is one thing because I guess they're not paying you, right? How do you then go to a commercial proposition and actually, A, get clients, but B, what do you offer them and how do you structure that for them?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really interesting challenge, and one that I think I'll always be navigating it. But I think there's an element of, again, some of the experiments that I had run or some of the ways in which I had tested and showed up gave me a sense for who my customers might be, what it was that they were seeing in me that I could then offer out and back to the world. What were the kind of feedback areas I was hearing from them when someone came to me? What was it they were saying about why they came to me? I see coaching as you're sort of selling yourself, right? You're selling your experience, you're selling your abilities, you're selling your ways in which you can support those individuals or those customers and companies. And so there's sort of deep listening that's required to understand what it is that they see in you, and then how you can then continue to offer that out to the world. So as it came to then thinking about even just the financials of it, there's market research you have to do. I might be based in Ireland, but my clients aren't. So how do I price myself appropriately across different locations? So I had to do research across the US, for example, where I have clients, the UK very much so, and Ireland. Your positioning, understanding your customer, your pricing, and then I think the marketing element of like, what's your message? I find there's connections everywhere. I'll see something out in the world, it will resonate with me for some reason, with maybe something that I'm working with the client on or that I've heard from clients. Try and marry the two in a way that feels relatable for clients. And I just put that out there. And if it sticks, sticks. If it doesn't, I'll try something different next week.
What kinds of people or roles, whatever, were the first clients you got? Were they all from Google or did you find them from elsewhere?
Definitely majority of tech clients, because I think there's just some credibility there, right? So
Yeah, of
folks
course.
that I've worked in that industry, which makes sense. Secondly, then there was definitely people that I had worked with directly or knew of me. There's that sort of network slash referral cohort that I'm very grateful for. I think that certainly drives probably about a third of my business. Then there was the partnerships, right? So the associate type partnerships, whether it's through the Hudson Institute of Coaching or whether it's through T Minus is another company that I do change leadership work for. I think they are fabulous partnerships to have, and they will have their own client bases and then they bring you in when your skill set is a match. So that could be tech, but not always. There could be something about the local culture, maybe in Ireland or the UK, broader skill set like change leadership is industry agnostic, obviously. So yeah, clients are a mix, but predominantly tech industry, predominantly senior leaders where I have credibility, predominantly those markets where I have experience, and then a mix of direct referrals and connections through third-party leadership development organizations.
When you started, what did you do? Did you throw up a LinkedIn post and did you do a big campaign thing? And what do you do these days to keep that pipeline ticking along?
One of the first things I did was I took a start your own business class.
So did I.
It was run by the local enterprise office here in Dublin.
Yeah.
And it was superb. Just great people, totally unrelated to my industry, but just really good, honest advisors. And what they did was they sort of reminded me of some of the basics. So yes, I had a business background. Yes, I worked in business. You can forget some of the real basics. So that was helpful. But they also challenged me. I kind of came in with misconceptions or preconceptions that maybe I needed to be challenged on. And I found it very useful. So something like, I never used LinkedIn. I didn't need to. I was working in an organization. It was sort of irrelevant for me. And so I had this notion of, is that really a channel that will be useful for me? And now it's incredibly useful. I get a lot of clients through LinkedIn. So I had to be challenged by someone other than myself. So that was a bit of a precursor, I guess, to building my business. I had my own coaches, so transition coaches, which were very helpful, people who had gone before me. So there's all that pre-work. Then when it came to the actual sort of putting myself out there, I felt like the biggest thing I needed to do was signal to people that I was shifting identities. Because I'd been known as this sort of Google leader for so long.
I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
I needed to signal to people. And I was fortunate that my network is very broad. I'd worked with people globally for years. So I had no way of like individually telling them. So I had to think of, well, how do I get the message out that I'm no longer the Google leader? I'm now moving into this career. And so I put a post out on LinkedIn, and thankfully that reached thousands of people as it turned out. But that was the beginning. It was safe. It was honest. It was comfortable, but it was like a line in the sand. And that was a way in which then I could then start building from there. And so I use primarily LinkedIn because I feel like it's just sort of the business social platform. I know TikTok and Instagram are moving towards that way, but I use LinkedIn more as the professional brand it has.
Yeah.
But what I do is I just post when I feel like I have something interesting to say, something that I feel like will resonate with what I'm experiencing or what I have experienced in my past or what my clients are experiencing. And I put it out there, and sometimes it lands and gains business and sometimes it doesn't. So I just try again. So that's the kind of LinkedIn piece. But then the other piece is like just being out in sort of physical form in the world. I will go to events like the Dublin Tech Summit I was at 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
I will go to local enterprise networking events and just talk to people and what are they experiencing? What are they seeing? I'm fortunate I have a very close peer network or ex-colleague network or coach networks. So I just plug into those because that's what gives me energy, regardless of whether it gives me business.
I don't know if you've seen that movie, Jerry Maguire. I keep thinking of the analogy of that moment where he leaves. Who's coming with me? Who's coming with me? And everyone's just stopping and staring at him in this huge crowded room. And then he walks out and leaves. It's quiet and suddenly just starts working again. I think sometimes when they leave, that goes, and that support network or that status, whatever, can leave. And now you're starting again. You've been through it, but also you're a coach. What's your advice to people who are either preparing for that or are going through that transition?
With my coaching hat on, but also with my own experience, I think One of the things my coaching studies helped me to understand was the value of learning and unlearning, right? So, what are the new things that you need to step into and learn, and the things that you need to sort of let go of? So, there might be some connections that will no longer be as relevant to you, or there might be experiences or whatever it is that you're not going to have to rely on. So, then you need to think, what's the new scaffolding that I need to build around me? So there might be a lot of new connections that you need to invest in building. So for me, it was like, who are the people that have set up coaching businesses that I need to talk to and learn from? And who are the people that have maybe set up their own business in another way, but could still provide me with great insight and valuable support? And I have to say, like the local Irish business network here has been incredible in that regard. I think there's like, what do you need to learn moving forward that will serve you, or at least potentially will serve you? And then what do you need to let go of from your past that will no longer be as useful? And how do you do that perhaps with some intention so that it becomes less jarring? You're taking some agency in it. And so I think that's part of the planning. I, for example, when I was thinking of leaving, like I literally went through all the connections that I could possibly think of from my time in Google. I was like, who are the people that I really want to ensure that I tell that I'm leaving, that they're aware of where I'm going and what I'm going to be doing, that, I ask them for whatever support or advice they might be able to give me. So there was very much an intentional pillar to my strategy, if you will, around letting go of certain things and building up other things.
What would you say to someone who you hear of tech layoffs and things? Meta had something recently. They don't have that benefit of planning, foresight to know that this is coming. So boom, it happens and they think, I've always been wanting to do it. What would you say then? Is it just accelerate everything that you just described, make those conversations happen really quickly, or what would it be?
Yes, if you're experiencing a real impact of the layoff, or you're thinking of making the leap in some way, but you just don't quite know what to do, yes, come and see me. But also, I think don't do it alone. Think about who are the people in your immediate vicinity right now that you could just go and have a quick conversation with, to run that by them. Like, here's what I'm thinking, or here's what I'm worried about. Here's what I've experienced. Not quite sure what to do. What could be 2 or 3 things you'd recommend? Just to get some fresh thinking to get you unstuck if you're feeling quite stuck can be helpful. The other thing is to just take 15 to 20 minutes or even half an hour for yourself, if you can, and just reflect a little bit on what it is that you're passionate about, what it is that you're good at, what it is that you enjoy doing, and think about where that kind of trifecta is, or the ikigai, right? That Venn diagram, like what you're good at and what people need from you and where you can get paid. And that can be 20, 30 minutes of thinking that can just help you get a little bit clearer on then some areas of exploration that you might decide to step forward into.
When I did my studies and got a graduate program, 3 years, moved around by this big global company across all different operations, different geographies and things, and I was embedded. I then went and worked in that company in other roles and stuff. So I was very embedded in a way, had big budgets, all that kind of stuff. When I changed companies into a different industry, which was much more cost conscious or whatever, let's say, I went from talking about budgets of millions to my new boss saying, oh, we've just saved $15 on this. And I'm going, what? And you described in Google and in tech companies, I guess, generally change is a constant. People are very comfortable with that. How do you coach people, or what's your advice to people who are looking for clients who may not come from that world? Do you need to adjust your thinking, your style when you're coaching and working with clients who come from a different sector where it is not all about change, or it's not all big budgets and things? How do you cope with that?
I think that's a really good question. It's a huge part of the work that I do with the T-minus leadership development company, where we run change leadership workshops. And a lot of the client work we do there are organizations or leaders who maybe have not thought about change in a long time. And now something in their system or their environment is shifting, and they are really experiencing sort of inner pain that can bring, right? What we try to do there is to help people understand their own reaction to change first. So what is it that you're afraid of losing, or what is it that's coming up for you as you think about this particular change, and getting a lot clearer on your own reaction so that you can then work with that to then support the others in your care to understand their reaction, be they stakeholders or team members. So actually a lot of the work we do is with organizations that maybe have not experienced a lot of change, and therefore it's a much bigger journey to go on, or seems like a much bigger journey. So we ground them first in understanding what change is, how it can impact us as individuals and as teams, and then how they have reacted themselves so that they are better able to then go and lead others through that. And then we move into the sort of stakeholder view and how to support stakeholders.
Nice. What advice would you have for others who are either setting up or running their own HR-related business on the marketing or growth side?
Be willing to experiment. I hope that's come across today. Understand your why. So my why has always been about helping people. So understand your why. Why are you going into this business? Why is it that you feel you can, support people in whatever way it is that you're trying to? Don't go it alone. Look around you and see what supports you can get from people, from courses, from education, from technology, and think about some of that scaffolding that you can put around you. And then give yourself a bit of a break. Not everything's going to be perfect. It's not going to be easy, but if you've got a good why and you really feel like you can add value out there, then keep at it. Get back up after the knocks and try something different and learn from it and move on.
Just to wrap it up, if someone's listening to this and they think, I think I know someone or a company that could benefit from Caroline's expertise, who does Zeal Compass help and where can they find you?
Yeah, zealcompass.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I would say that's a great avenue. I'm always looking around there somewhere. So we help senior leaders in tech who are struggling to perhaps navigate change in their own world or to lead others through change. That is the essence of what I do. And I do that through one-on-one coaching, through group coaching, and through facilitated workshops.
Brilliant. So that is zealcompass.com. And check the show notes for the links and things like that. And we'll have Caroline's LinkedIn there as well. So Caroline, thank you so much for sharing your advice, your story, and I wish you all the best for you in the business in the future.
Thank you so much, Jen. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us today on A Better HR Business, the podcast that explores the world of HR consulting and HR tech businesses. For show notes and downloads, go to www.getmorehrclients.com/podcast. That's getmorehrclients.com/podcast. Remember to subscribe and share the show with any friends who are busy growing a HR business. Thanks and see you next time.